Welcome to part 3 of our Vectorworks 2021 drafting tutorial. In part 3, we will cover drafting light plots and preparing viewports for printing. So we'll talk through creating lighting positions, placing instruments, editing the appropriate data, and then putting together the final drawing for printing. It'll use many of the same concepts and tools that we learned in parts 1 and 2, and will introduce additional features of the software unique to drafting light plots. It's important to know that much like the scenery drafting tutorial, this will serve as a basic introduction to drafting light plots. It will not cover anything 3D or rendering of any kind, Vectorworks, caption, vision, etc. So please know that there is much, much more to this software. So let's start by opening up your Laughter on the 23rd Floor file that you created in the previous tutorial. And we're going to come and hover over the navigation palette until it opens up. And in the second column next to scenery, we're going to click to change from the I to an X. This means that the scenery layer is going to be invisible and the scenery will be turned off, which is perfectly fine for this tutorial. We're not going to need it. And while we're here, we're going to go ahead and click next to lighting positions so that the check mark is there, activating the lighting positions as the active layer. You'll see that my scenery layer is now turned off and I can't see it. And lighting in positions is my active layer. So before lights can be hung, there has to be something to hang them on. And Vectorworks has the capability of knowing that specific symbols are lighting positions for referencing information in various forms and across different software platforms. So we're going to start by placing the overhead electrics. So in the lighting positions layer, which is active, I'm going to go to my resource manager and Vectorworks libraries and objects entertainment stage and lighting positions imperial. And it will give me all of these stock options that are inherent in the Vectorworks library. And we're going to choose the 50-foot pipe, so double click on that to select it. We'll come off of here, our resource manager will collapse, and here's my pipe ready to be inserted. So I'm going to zoom in and grab the smart point of my first electric right there, and then come over to intersect with centerline, and I'll click twice, and that will insert that pipe. So with that selected, I can come up to my object info palette, and I can see that Vectorworks knows that it's a 2D, 3D symbol on the rigging and pipes class and on the lighting positions layer. So Vectorworks does not know that this is a lighting position yet. We're going to change that next. Right now, it just thinks it's a 2D, 3D symbol, which means it's a symbol in the software that contains both two-dimensional and three-dimensional information, but will only be viewed as two-dimensional in our top plan view, just for ease and clarity. So to change this to a hanging position, with it selected, we're going to go up to Spotlight and Object Conversion, Convert to Hanging Position. And a new dialog box will pop up, and I'm going to name this number 1 electric. And we'll click OK. And then again, I'm going to hover over my object info palette. Now Vectorworks knows that this is a hanging position, and it has other information that's already been populated that we'll get into a little bit later on in terms of numbering, etc. So if we zoom in on this now, we can see that it has, in fact, called this the number 1 electric, and it has populated the name of that position right next to it so that we can see it on the drawing. From here, we can just duplicate and change things, much like we did before. So I'm going to select this and duplicate it with Command D. And I'll grab the endpoint smart point and come up and grab the smart point by my second electric. Hold down Shift to lock in that position until I'm even with it, and now I've duplicated it and moved that position up. So with this one selected, obviously we're not going to have two first electrics. This one's going to be our second electric. So we'll hover over Object Info Palette, and we'll just change this to number 2 electric. Okay, and I'm going to do that 2 more times for my third and fourth electric. Great. Now that I've got that, I'm going to go ahead and save my file. So Command S. So next we're going to continue by placing the front of house positions. This is part of the reason that your center line was extended so long from the back of the theater, so that it would go ahead and cross the front of house positions once we placed them. So again, in my lighting positions layer, I'm going to go into my resource manager, and it's going to automatically show me that I am in Vectorworks Libraries, Objects, Entertainment Stage, and Lighting Positions. It's defaulting to that because that's the last thing that I used. And I'm going to go ahead and select the 40-foot pipe for this one. So we'll double click on that, and there's my 40-foot pipe. So to do this, I'm going to zoom in on the origin point of my drawing, which you'll remember from the previous tutorial. It's our 0, 0. It's where plaster line and center line meet. And I'm going to go ahead and double click there to insert that symbol. So now that I know that any distances that I type in, it's going to reference that specific point to move the object. So I'm going to go ahead and move this. So Command M, I get my dialog box. We're not going to move it at all on the X axis. We put it on center line, which is where we want it. So on the Y axis, I'm going to tell it it's going to be minus 21 feet. Click OK, and now I've moved the pipe out front. Okay. Again, Vectorworks does not know that this is a hanging position yet. It still thinks it's just a 2D, 3D symbol. So we need to go through the same process again of Spotlight, Object Conversion, Convert to Hanging Position, and we're going to call this FOH Truss number 1. Okay. And with it selected, we'll zoom in and you can see, in fact, it's populated that name, and Vectorworks knows that it is a hanging position. Okay. There's going to be 2 trusses in this theater that we are creating. So much like the front of house, or the overhead electric, excuse me, we're going to select this and duplicate it, Command D, and then move it, Command M, and we're going to move it 0 on the x-axis. We still want it centered. And on the y-axis, we're going to move it an additional negative 11 feet 9 inches. Okay, there's my second front of house truss. And I'll go up to the Object Info palette and say, this is going to be FOH truss number 2. Great. And it has changed that name. So there are our stock positions all inserted. I'm going to go ahead and fit to page and save my file. In section 2 of this tutorial, we'll work on creating some custom lighting positions out in the front of house.